You've probably heard the biblical quote, "He, or she, in this case, who increaseth knowledge, increaseth sorrow." And I'm getting biblical here for a reason. You'll already know where I'm going with this if you're familiar with some of the more unsettling aspects of Cyberpunk 2077's digital world. But if not, fret not. Because today, we will not only be going over the story of Sandra Dorsett, but the story and potential conspiracies of Night City's most mysterious corporation, Night Corp. Hello, my name is Liddy, and welcome to Shaped by Stories, where we unpack how characters shape stories, and how those stories shape us. Let's get into it. If one considers the waterworks, power systems, roads, public transport, net connection, general city infrastructure as Night City's circulatory system, well, then you could consider Night Corp as the city's beating heart. And that company has certainly been alive and kicking a lot longer than the man who founded it. Richard Knight, born in 1954, was initially set on becoming an engineer, before turning to business, something he proved adept at. In the years leading up to the collapse, Knight both started and helped direct a number of urban development companies. He wasn't new to this industry by the time he founded Knight International in 1994, partially in response to the chaos of the collapse. Richard Knight had dreams of building a city completely cut off from the vulnerabilities of the pre-collapse world. A city that was massive in size and scope and economic power, controlled and managed by corporations. This city would be staffed by the corps, it would be funded by the corps, it would be policed by the corps. This was the world that he'd found his own sense of order in through his work, so hey, why not try to cram it into a whole city? He purchased the land of the fading town of Morro Bay, and began construction of what was, at its inception, named Coronado City. Fun fact, the area used to be called Morro Bay, but was renamed Del Coronado Bay after Knight claimed the area in order to bury the bloody history of the land, as gangs had razed the town and the area in general just prior to Knight's arrival. So yeah, this patch of land has a particularly bloody history. Rather fitting. Knight's vision only came to pass due to his corporate contacts, and Coronado City was largely funded by corporate investors, like Petrochem, Asukaga and Finch, even Arasaka to an extent. They aren't just there in Night City to conduct business. When you next look up at the towers of the inner city, or the slick and rust yards north of Watson, remember, the origins of this hellhole rests with them. As outlined in The World of Cyberpunk 2077, Knight lured in the corpse with big promises of tax breaks and the promise of the city being a safe home for corporate employees. Little to no crime, cleanliness, self-sufficiency, the works. But Richard Knight always had enemies. Those who had been excluded from Coronado City's development, including unions, and even some of Knight's old partners from his days at Halsey, Ferris, and Knight, now called Halsey, Ferris, and Skiff. Much of the East Coast construction companies as well were owned by various mafia/mobs, and it angered them that Knight chose to use his own construction know-how instead of theirs. There was also the added annoyance of Knight saying that he didn't want any criminal activity in his city, just the corpse, which is kind of ironic. According to the Cyberpunk wiki, through the first 4 years of Coronado City's construction, there were daily threats against Knight's life. Threats he tended to ignore. Richard Knight was sort of a guy with a big head, and this really shows with his filling in of the Del Coronado Bay in 1993. The guy ordered the surrounding hills to be scraped down and dumped into the ocean to make room for a city expansion. And I mean, this kind of thing isn't anything new. People have filled in water for ages to expand in some way, shape, or form, but Richard Knight looked at hills and mountains and said, bet. And Knight lived long enough to see some of the promise of his vision becoming Coronado City's reality. However, there is one particular picture of him, specifically this art right here, where when you look at his eyes, you can almost see the stress in them, how bloodshot they seem to look. There's no date on this picture, but it may very well have been towards the end of his life, on the night of September 20th, 1998. No one knows exactly what went down, or how it happened, or why it happened. There's all kinds of rumors and urban legends. But what we do know, at least according to tabletop lore, is that Richard Knight was shot and killed in his penthouse, atop Parkview Tower. Whoever killed him was never found. Tonight, on Unsolved Mysteries, we don't find out who killed Richard Knight. I'm sorry, but it could literally have been anyone. Maybe Richard Knight had a feeling that someone was gunning for him. Just, again, that art where he just looks stressed to me. I don't know. It's like he knew. He's like, oh shit, I'm fucked. But maybe in Cyberpunk Orion or in the next tabletop expansion, maybe we'll find out some more. And unfortunately for Richard Knight, after his death, the crime syndicates and gangs that he so wanted to keep as far from Coronado City as possible, well, they moved in. And the corporations weren't very happy about this. So you can imagine the chaos that ensued. The city of Richard Knight's dreams, his last mark on the world, became a noteworthy nightmare. And as if to salt the posthumous wound, the new city council renamed Coronado City to Night City in his honor. I think the world of Cyberpunk 2077 put Night City's history best. Quote, over the course of 80 years, we've managed to build the city from scratch, screw it up by turning it into a playground for gangs and corporations, blow up the city center with a genuine nuke, almost kick out the corpos, rebuild the city without government aid, avoid war with the NUSA, and, finally, turn the city back into a playground for gangs and corpos. Not bad for less than a century. And as time went on, Knight International changed faces and names and CEOs, with his wife Miriam being his direct successor when it came to his legacy. So Miriam, Richard's wife, actually helped transition the company to what is, by the 2070s, known as Night Corp. She was the first CEO, and she might even still be alive by 2077. So yeah, she's not just a background character who's Richard's wife, she was a big deal on her own. I wonder if we'd get to see her or hear from her in the sequel. That would be pretty cool. Although she was apparently long gone from the corporate scene with Night Corp by time 2077 rolls around, one could argue that the corporation still sticks to the way she ran things in the sense that it kept its nose, for the most part, out of other corporations' conflicts and interests and everything like that. Night Corp knows how to keep a low profile.
Sneaky.
Okay, what are we sneaking?
And by 2077, Night Corp is the corporation that has the most noticeable effect on the city that it was made for, even if it's the least mentioned of all the corporations. Everywhere V looks, every sidewalk, every mega building, every flush of the toilet or net access point, even every light that turns on, Night Corp has at least something to do with it. You can see their advertisements around Night City looking kind of like a no-name advertisement. If you're Canadian and you know that grocery brand, I always think of No Name when I look at Night Corp advertisements. You can see their advertisements around NC, advertising a 3-hour maglev line between Night City and Chicago coming in 2080, which may be a reference to Orion taking place in Chicago potentially, because there was that quote where Mike Pondsmith said that Project Orion has Night City and another city that feels like Chicago gone wrong, and then someone on Reddit was like, so basically Chicago then. I don't know if that's true or not. But then it's in a Night Corp advertisement makes me go, oh shit, what's Night Corp up to in the sequel? And Night Corp also tries to sell themselves and their mission statement on their website as the company with Night City's best interests in mind. And as we've all come to realize by now, any corp that says something like that tends to either be downright lying or not including massive strings attached to such a statement. It's all smoke and mirrors and PR. And it's also very easy to miss the fact that Night Corp does have its own tower in the city center, their own sleepy shadow that is second in stature only to Arasaka Tower. Even the road their tower stands upon seems like a slash that cuts the Corpo Plaza in two, hinting that maybe the biggest corporate threat to Militech, to Arasaka, to Petrochem, etc., is actually hiding in plain sight and waiting to strike in the dark. At 29 years old, Sandra Dorsett is quite the accomplished netrunner working for Night Corp. She's climbed the corporate ladder from what may have been an underprivileged background. We don't know her origins for certain, as it's not directly stated anywhere, but in her Humans of Night City entry, Sandra describes her experience in the corporate world as follows. Never considered myself the lucky few. Studied hard when I was a kid. Been working hard since I joined the Corpo. Guess I'm the kind of person who radiates peer pressure. Not gonna apologize for that. Sorry. I even got my supervisor super competitive. He used to be Chumbe and all, faking up a big nice boss face until he learned about my project. 'Cause it was a good project. 'Cause we were making good progress. Local nursing homes need our AI to keep running, and the team was assigned to improve AI behavior too, and I'm quoting our PR here, better support the elder citizens' mental well-being. He was telling me I moved too fast, or I'd overstepped. Pretty sure I hadn't, because I freaking love reading NDAs and dancing around them. Again, we don't know Sandra's exact origins, but I'm almost reminded of Jefferson Peralta's, just a smidge. As Jefferson was a kid from a lower income family in your average Night City neighborhood, studying hard and winning a scholarship from, of all corporations, Night Corp. Oh yes. Night Corp does its own sort of philanthropy here and there, and as we'll get into Jefferson's upcoming video, it's no coincidence, at least I think, that Jefferson was the one they chose to support. Maybe Sandra had a similar experience. Even if she wasn't sent to school by Night Corp, it's interesting she ended up with them. But what we do know, Sandra works ridiculously hard. She has a wicked work ethic. She sounds like she has a deep sense of motivation that goes just beyond money, and she certainly enjoys the challenge of her work. She covers her bases, she reads the fine print, and the other thing too that separates Sandra from a lot of corpos, she actually does seem to have a soul. She does seem to care beyond climbing the corporate ladder. Our first little glimpse of that is how she describes the AI she was working on for nursing homes as a good project. And sure, that could just mean she enjoyed the challenge of this particular project. But as her story develops, we do see that Sandra actually does give a shit about people. This further makes me think that Sandra understands what it is like to be a regular person in the cyberpunk world, a powerless person, somebody at the bottom. She doesn't seem to have any illusions about the unfairness of the world around her by time of 2077. Except, perhaps, her own capabilities in evading trouble. Sometime around 2076, Sandra had begun snooping around her company's files. And while it's not outlined super clearly how she began this little snooping mission, we can find in her 36th journal entry, tucked in her apartment, this. Weird. It looks like a non-42 was right after all. I recently found a previously uncharted section of the net out in the boonies, even though I'd already been there maybe 20 odd times. I guess you can only access it with the right parameters. It only cost me a week of sleepless nights, but I finally finished the Leviathan and punched through the section undetected. At least I think. Good thing too, because it turns out a non-42 sicked Night Corp's servers against me. I really should just take a break, quit the net for a few months. But those files really did look suspicious. As it says in her codex entry, Sandra doesn't just do net running and coding stuff for Night Corp, she does a lot on her own time, and it seems after hours, Sandra found some sort of trail left by the unknown, a non-42. She decided to take a chance and punch into Night Corp servers from the outside, and retrieved some encrypted company data. Depending on your dialogue choices, she can actually go into detail a smidge with a net running V about how she dug her way in.
Night Corp secured up the ass. Can't just upload the usual blackout and fire shaft. You must have whipped up some angry demons. You zip them up in an imp?
Yeah, Leviathan. Even Cerberus isn't enough if you want to punch through that kind of corpo ice.
You can understand why Sandra is a remarkably decent runner for her age, which is why she can feature later on in another hack-heavy quest. But what Sandra found in those Night Corp files, it shook her to the core. Should V decrypt the shard, Operation Carpe Noctem, Operation Seize the Night, we can see for ourselves what she found. For Night Corp internal use only. The tests have come back successful. The artificial intelligence CN07 has proved itself capable of bypassing commercial, device-specific, and macro security systems accessible to Night Corp employees of the lowest ranks. None of the test subjects were aware that this experiment was being conducted on them. In compliance with the orders it was given, CN07 focused mostly on subject HK13, which at the time of the experiment's commencement was classified as calm and apathetic. After a period of subliminal conditioning, as we predicted, HK13 began to display acute psychopathic behavior. The highlight was a dispute over coffee, during which HK13 strangled one of their colleagues, then jumped out the 16th floor window of the research facility. We will soon commence the next phase of the procedure and install CN07 onto the devices of our actual target. And this naturally was a freakish discovery. And in Sandra's next journal entry, entry 37, she expresses regret, knowing what she's found out about the project could spell her doom. Would she be the next test subject to jump out a 16th floor window after their coworker steals their coffee? Sandra also brings up something interesting, though, to do with Night Corp's secret work on the moon. Jesus, those files. Maybe I should have just left them alone. Each of them could be a puppet without realizing it. And those flights to the moon, what are they cooking up there? Was it human DNA, or... I couldn't run a thorough scan. I only had time to break through one folder's ice. Either way, I'm pretty sure they flagged me. Can't tell if it was an unmasking demon or their dweller. Okay, so we know of two big netrunners who went to the moon. Lucy and Songbird. And we know that Mr. Blue Eyes, who's like 99% affiliated with Night Corp from what people have dug up on him, appears for a split second in Songbird's Getting on the Rocket ending. There he is, all creepy-like. He's most likely her mysterious benefactor. And he also appears in the Jefferson Peralez quest ending. Again, all creepy-like. And DNA. What kind of weird, wacky DNA shit are they doing? Okay, so I'm gonna bring this up briefly here. I'll get more into it in the Blue Eyes video, but in the Cyberpunk 2077 novel, no coincidence, spoilers be gone or hold your peace now, we discover Militech's work on a human-AI hybrid project. This is meant to create super soldiers of a sort, or so Militech says, though Arasaka argues that these hybrids could be used as a bridge between the humans and the AI. It's all very interesting. The AI hybrid we get to know in this story is ARS-03. There's a theory that V is ARS-05 because, well, Roman numeral would be ARS-V, but I'm not sure if I buy that. I think there's just too much that doesn't fit with that. It would be cool if that was the case, but right now I don't think that that's true. But what if the ARS program is continuing on the moon? And the other thing I'd like to note about ARS-03 is that ARS-03 was once an actual person. Like, they didn't grow ARS-03 in a vat. This was an actual guy that was kidnapped after he snapped and went cyberpsycho for an understandable reason, and they did some freaky brain surgery where they took half his brain away and put in an AI that was potentially from beyond the black wall but not directly confirmed, and who knows, maybe they had to do some extra DNA manipulation shit to make it work. So, we know that, through creeping on Adam Smasher's computer on the Ebunica, he was blackmailing Anthony Gilchrist, the mole from the Meredith Stout questline in the intro. Through listening to some audio files, we can find out that Smasher was trying to get him to stop the Militech board from making an unknown deal with Night Corp. And the other hint that there may be some connections between Night Corp and Militech is that the Militech corpo in charge of the ARS program, in no coincidence, his name's Stanley, he's noted in the final chapter, which is the big reveal moment of the whole book, to have blue eyes. It's not hard to understand why people think that he may be one of the blue-eyed people that 2077 hints towards being affiliated with Night Corp. Considering how the book waited until the very last chapter, the last couple pages, to point that out. It's like they really want you to notice it. Of course, he could just have blue eyes, but when you remember that the book's title is No Coincidence, and the whole story is about how there really are no coincidences. There's also the fact of Militech's work on Cynosure back in the day. Maybe the AIs that allegedly, according to some very well thought out theories, inhabit the bodies of these blue-eyed individuals came from that era and project. Maybe Phantom Liberty was entirely planned by the rogue AIs and the blue-eyed bodies all along, by Night Corp. Anyway, back to Sandra. All she knows is that there's some weird shit involving AI mind control and potentially people messing around with human DNA on an unprecedented level. Sandra tried her best after this discovery and these realizations to go to ground, even still actually going to work to keep up appearances despite the risk it presented. She may have even been trying to dig up more against her better judgment. But she says, in Journal Entry 38, that someone is watching her. Through the net, in person. She says, quote, "Some shady-looking types followed me all the way to work today. When I finally worked up the nerve to turn around and face them, they vanished. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but I think they were speaking Russian. I'm starting to get a little freaked out." And as we know at the beginning of 2077's story, we find Sandra near death in a scav den. Her trauma team tracker has been blocked and she lies in a bathtub, awaiting harvest for her expensive chrome. But V and Jackie, thankfully, arrived just in time to hand her to trauma team. Can we confirm that the scavs were sicked on her at Night Corp's insistence? No. Does it seem a little convenient? Yes. And again, if there's anything the No Coincidence novel tells us, it's be wary of such coincidences, but hey, who knows? But the scavs did manage to hold on to one thing of Dorset's, a datapad with the very information she nabbed from Night Corp. As V is searching for a way to save their life, they actually get reconnected with Sandra through Wakako Okada, a nice little surprise to see a character that you would think was just a filler NPC for a tutorial mission. And V has to go and fetch that datapad from a scav hideout in Watson, a hideout we can actually raid as part of one of Regina's gigs. When we call Sandra to tell her we have the data, we both see how shaken she is by what she experienced at the hands of the scavs, like who wouldn't be, but also that she's not just the average Night City corpo ice queen.
V. You're V, right? You find the data bank?
Someone's back in tip-top shape. Trauma must have put you back together in no time.
Yep. Good as new. Still, if not for you, wouldn't have been anything left to put back together. Never got the chance to thank you properly. Wasn't there someone else with you? Big guy? Whenever you get a chance, tell him I said thanks.
Yeah, about that. Jackie's dead.
No. My condolences. It wasn't because of me, was it?
No. He was killed by Arasaka. Wasn't too long after we found you. Jackie always had too much cool to let anyone know he gave a shit, but after everything you went through, he'd be happy you remembered him.
And it really does show that, sure, Night City is full of assholes who wouldn't really care at all about this person they didn't even properly meet. Sandra is saddened to hear of Jackie's loss. It does say a lot about the kind of person that she is, that she shares that with V, because, you know, not everybody is that emotionally vulnerable with V throughout the game. But also, the other thing, too, that I like about this moment is that it does show that there are people in this hellhole who do appreciate the actions of others. Even if that action was part of a gig for V and Jackie, which Sandra can point out to a more unscrupulous V, she's grateful. V heads to Sandra's apartment in Watson, across the street from Lizzie's bar, in fact. As we walk up, we see a security camera glaring at us as we knock at the door. Sandra's got a Militech turret in her living room, and Sandra's like, "Are you alone? Close the door, hurry up." And, I mean, you totally understand why she's hyper alert. The scavs got her, and she's traumatized by what happened. But that is not the extent of her worries, as a V who cracks the data on her pad would know. So the best and most expansive way you could do this quest is through decrypting the shard and reading its contents. And there's no point in lying to Sandra if you hacked the shard and read it for yourself. Sandra will know if you did. She'll actually pay you a pittance if you're dishonest rather than the full payment. So you might as well just tell her the truth. Even if you didn't hack the data, Sandra is rather curt with V, and she will urge them to leave as soon as she gets the data pad, but she does thank V for complimenting her apartment, though. V can choose to blackmail Sandra, threatening to give the data to Night Corp and fully expose her. Which doesn't end well, because she will attack you, and you will have to flatline her. I actually do like that that's how she chooses to go about things, because Sandra does fear for her life, but she won't be blackmailed. It does fit with what we know of the kind of person she is. She is quite bold. And a V who recognizes that will learn the most about her, the most about Operation Carpe Noctem, and even Night Corp to an extent. A V who congratulates Sandra on hacking Night Corp will receive a sort of warm reaction.
To congratulate you, of course. Anyone who hacks Night Corp's earned my respect.
Oh. Well, thank you. You know, if they end up going through with it, then...
The net will become even more dangerous. You were worried they'd find out about you.
Exactly.
Use an AGI to condition workers' minds. That's some supervillain shit right there.
Not just workers. Anyone. That's the scariest part. You've been a big help. Here, I threw in a little extra for a fellow runner. It's good to be reminded I'm not in this fight alone.
Thanks. Be seeing you.
And with the added angle of net running knowledge, she will pay us the most out of all options. But it's quite cool to learn about her sense of morality. Sandra recognizes the danger that this AI presents, not just to her, and she reassures V that the data will not be wasted. She doesn't even want to sell it for profit. No, she wants to use it to stop whatever Night Corp is up to, or at least protect the world. Or at least, she may be being played by someone else to think that's what she's doing, because there's more to this later we're gonna discuss. While looking around Sandra's apartment, we can find some of Samurai's music on loud display, hinting towards her own feelings, maybe, on the established order of things. Her own rebel path of sorts, though dangerous, is one she seems hell-bent on following. And she's not alone, as we can discover. I never would have found out this existed if it wasn't for the Cyberpunk wiki, because this isn't an NCPD marked location. It is in the middle of the solar arrays just outside Night City, which I never thought to return to. I never would have if the wiki hadn't linked this particular shard on Sandra Dorsett's page, which then links to this unmarked Netwatch trailer way out here. So, Netwatch has a little operations camp out here, and it's revealed that the big focus of its operatives was to capture the netrunner identified as Sandra D. Yes, Sandra Dorsett is being hunted by Netwatch, at Night Corp's behest. So, Night Corp knows something of what she did, for sure. Archived conversation, Sandra D and redacted. Sandra says, "I hacked the Corp Thing account. I am Sandra. You're playing a very dangerous game with Night Corp." Redacted says, "That print was not mine. But if you really are Sandra, yes, I am playing a dangerous game. I'm finding you." Sandra replies, "Good luck with that. There's an army of netrunners that you'd have to fight through first. If I were you, I wouldn't trust Night Corp and get fried in whatever they do." Redacted says, "Who told you I trust anyone? Me trusting a corpo? Are you nuts?" Sandra says, "Good." And then Redacted says, "Gonna draw my own conclusions when I find you." Only for Sandra to end the conversation by saying, I need to run before I'll have Netwatch on my ass again. So it seems like Sandra is really trying to be fair here with whoever this stranger is that she's spoken to. It could be a Netwatch agent, that is my guess. Seems like she's trying to warn them because, yeah, they might be next on the AI mind control table if they aren't already. Like, really, if we're connecting Netrunners, Night Corp, and the Moon, I don't think it's crazy to think that Night Corp would be like, hey, as a token of thanks, Netwatch, we're gonna pay for an all-inclusive vacation to our part of the moon. Nothing bad will happen to you, I swear. On the Netwatch agent's computer in this trailer, we can actually find a list of Netrunners that Sandra has joined forces with. And fun fact, all the names are named after fans who won the Cyberpunk 2077 ARG. Sandra's exact quest with these runners isn't explained to us, but she does seem like she wants to stop Night Corp, and it seems like these codenamed Netrunners do too. That's pretty cool. And this point is kind of like, yeah, whatever, because a name is just a name a lot of the time, but sometimes it's not. And Sandra is derived from the Greek name Alexandros, and that means defender of man or a protector of humankind. So I just think it's kind of fitting, considering what she's supposedly doing here with her work against Night Corp and the mind control AI. That was cool. What's in a name? Sometimes a lot. The other thing, too, is, on this computer, Netwatch found that Sandra may have been backed by the NUSA, even directly assisted. It said that Dorset accessed Netwatch archives, presumably with NUSA intelligence help, which makes me wonder. Maybe all Myers did with So-Me was to combat what she knows of the blue-eyed conspiracy. I'm not trying to gloss over Myers' faults that make many people understandably dislike her, but she does imply that she's sort of stuck in her situation too, that she almost doesn't seem to have a choice in the things that she does. And why would she explain herself to V? Like, really? It would be quite something to find out in Cyberpunk Orion that Myers and the FIA were funding Dorset, because keep in mind that the FIA was allegedly formed to combat Militech's growing inner conflict against the NUSA government that held its reins. I'm almost kind of reminded of Johnny and how Johnny's big final op was actually a Militech operation. Like, how would it be that Sandra, in the heat of her own rebel path, rebel movement, kind of, it would be ironic if she wasn't actually in charge of it at all. They just let her think that she was the big center of it. Meanwhile, she was just doing what the NUSA or the FIA wants her to do. That is the theory to further discuss at a later date. The other email on this computer, though, in the Netwatch trailer, is that Netwatch found the body of one of their operatives lying dead in the Badlands, and we can find them examining it when we arrive. He was shot in the back, in the spine, they think by someone connected to Dorset. Maybe Dorset herself did it. Maybe that's what the conversation shard we find on the desk in the trailer was leading up to. Maybe Redacted is this Netrunner. But I feel like that conversation was through the net that this happened because it's her tag name. I feel like Sandra wouldn't just walk over there, right? Especially considering how scared she seems to go outside. But there's still one more instance of Sandra Dorset that we can encounter in 2077. And this is during Phantom Liberty's quest, Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos, when we need a Netrunner to hack MaxTac. Initially, Sandra doesn't want to help until she heard what V wants her to crack. We already know she's tempted by big risk, big reward, and she will get the data for V, I think in 8 hours. But she wants V to install a virus on one of the MaxTac operatives in Songbird's convoy, to install a backdoor into MaxTac's systems for her own purposes. V says that having this access could, down the chain, be a hook in Night Corp. To what end, only Sandra knows. What we know is that MaxTac, which is part of the NCPD, is arguably the most dangerous military-type force in NC, and that the NCPD is largely funded by Night Corp, among other corporations, including Militech to an extent. A V with a high enough cool skill, however, can actually tell Sandra no, and actually arguably save her ass here. 'Cause for sure, Sandra is notably ambitious, she's capable enough of a runner to hack Night Corp, MaxTac, who knows who else. But she very well could be on her last life with this one. Because you know what they say, curiosity killed the cat. And hopefully, Sandra takes care not to end up like Gary. Thank you for watching the Sandra Dorset video. I think you know where we're heading with this one. We are building up the blocks to the Mr. Blue Eyes video. And yeah, I would strongly recommend if you're looking forward to that video and you haven't read the No Coincidence novel, go read it. I'll put it on the screen right now. It's a really good book. It might take a couple reads to fully grasp everything because there's a lot of perspective jumping. I also want to take an opportunity here to share with you Kala Elizabeth, who is an amazing YouTuber who covers both Cyberpunk and Mass Effect. I would strongly recommend checking out Kala's channel. There's a lot of good stuff there. I just watched Kala's Garrus Vicarian video because there's no Shepherd without Vicarian, as we all know, and 10 out of 10 would watch again. I will be linking Kala's channel down in the description below for anybody who wants to fill their day with some amazing videos. Thank you so much to my members for supporting the channel. It means a lot, members. Members, if you were a netrunner who hacked Night Corp and got really sketchy data about DNA, AI, dicking around shit, I would not blackmail you. I would tell you you're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing. The galaxy needs to know about this. And thank you, of course, to everybody else for simply watching, for commenting, for liking, subscribing. It helps the channel out immensely. Have a good one, guys, and I will see you again in the next one. Goodbye!